The alarms began before dawn. A low, rumbling hum shivered through the hull, deep, organic, like the planet itself had turned over in its sleep. The deck plates vibrated under my boots as I sprinted through the narrow corridor toward the reactor bay. Emergency strobes pulsed red and white, slicing through the dark in heartbeats. Reactor breach. Core instability at 40%. Kira's voice cracked over the intercom. Sharp, controlled panic. Containment field failing. Coolant line 3's ruptured. "I'm on it," I shouted back. My throat was raw from smoke and lack of sleep. "Where's Gene?" "Still outside the perimeter. He's trying to reroute auxiliary power from the rover." "Outside? Christ. The air out there could flay skin if you stayed too long." But we were out of options. I reached the reactor chamber. A circular room lit by violent blue arcs of plasma. The smell of scorched metal thick in the air. The coolant conduit on the far wall had burst, spraying translucent vapor that crystallized instantly on contact with my visor. The readouts were a blur of warnings. Core temp 910 degrees Celsius, rising 912, 914. Kira was already there, kneeling by the control panel, gloves trembling as she tried to reroute coolant flow manually. Her faceplate was streaked with condensation, reflecting the light like tears. "It's spreading through the lower coils," she said. "If it hits the containment shell, it'll vaporize half the ship." I finished for her. We didn't need to say the rest. If the ship went, the fuel tanks would ignite, and the explosion would flatten the entire camp. The creatures, the luminous tendrils we'd come to know as the planet's living veins, pulsed faintly through the transparent floor, as if sensing the coming chaos. I grabbed the emergency coolant regulator and twisted hard, feeling the resistance fight back. The valve screeched open. A hiss of freezing gas blasted out, filling the chamber with fog so dense it swallowed the light. For a moment, the core stabilized, just a flicker of green on the console. Then another tremor hit, stronger this time. The entire structure groaned like a wounded animal. Containment slipping again.
Kira shouted.
I checked the diagnostics. The field wasn't failing from inside, it was the planet. The sensors showed a surge of electromagnetic activity directly beneath us. The bioluminescent forests around the camp were lighting up like a heartbeat, synchronized, rhythmic, converging on our position. "They're responding to the reactor," I said quietly. "They think it's alive." The thought chilled me more than the coolant fog. We'd built our temporary base above what we assumed was inert ground, but we'd been wrong. The entire crust was laced with organic filaments, roots, veins, call them what you will. The reactor's energy had awakened something ancient, something vast. "Kira, we have to shut it down completely. Manual overrides jammed. We'd need to vent the entire core to space. Then we do it." She turned to me, realization dawning. "That means..." "I know. If we vented the core manually, someone would have to go inside the reactor's outer shell, physically unlock the bypass clamps to release the plasma conduit. Radiation, pressure, heat. No suit could handle it for more than a few minutes. It was suicide. But if we didn't, everyone died." The comms crackled. Jin's voice came through, fragmented by interference. "I rerouted power, but it's not holding. You've got maybe 5 minutes before the..." Static drowned him out. I looked at Kira. She knew what I was thinking. "You can't," she said, voice breaking. "We'll find another way." "There isn't another way," I said. "You keep the others safe. When it's over, get to the valley, follow the river." The atmospheric readings there were stable. "Maybe the dropship can." Her gloved hand slammed against my chest plate. "Don't do this." The ship groaned again, metal screaming in pain. The lights flickered, then dimmed to emergency red. I could see it in her eyes. She already knew the decision was made. "Make it quick," she whispered. The reactor chamber was hell. The closer I got to the core, the hotter it became. Heat radiated through my suit like a living thing. The air shimmered, vibrating with a low-frequency hum that felt like it was inside my bones. My heads-up display began to glitch, numbers distorting, colors inverting. I crawled into the access tunnel, dragging the emergency override unit behind me. The reactor's light filled the tunnel, bright as a miniature sun. Each pulse made the walls tremble. As I reached the inner chamber, I saw them through the glass, the creatures. Thousands of luminous shapes surrounding the base outside, their tendrils glowing in perfect rhythm with the reactor's pulse. They weren't attacking. They were watching. For weeks, we'd fought them, thinking they were predators. But maybe they'd just been trying to communicate, drawn to our power source like moths to flame, not understanding what it was. And now they'd come to witness its death. I reached the first bypass clamp. The metal burned through my gloves as I gripped it. I twisted with all my strength. The lever screamed, then gave way. The status indicator dropped to amber. One down. The second was harder. My vision blurred from heat and radiation. My skin felt like it was boiling under the suit. Every breath was a knife. "Kira," I said through the comms. "Clamp 1 released. 2 to go." Her voice came faintly through the static. "You don't have to narrate this, damn it. Just come back. Tell Gene he was right about the river. It's connected to them somehow. Follow it downstream. Don't do this to me, Commander." I almost smiled. "You'll hate me less if you survive." The second clamp released with a deafening clang. A wave of energy slammed through the chamber, throwing me against the bulkhead. My visor cracked. Thin lines spiderwebbed across the glass. Through the fracture, I saw light, not just from the reactor, but from outside. The planet was glowing. The entire valley, the trees, the rivers. All of it pulsed in unison with the ship's heartbeat. Then I realized the planet wasn't attacking. It was trying to cool us down. Massive tendrils, translucent like veins of light, had risen from the ground, coiling around the ship's outer hull, siphoning energy into the soil. The bioluminescent rivers were acting as conduits, dispersing the heat. The planet was saving us in its own way. It wasn't enough. The core temp climbed again. 980 degrees Celsius. 990 degrees Celsius. One more clamp. I stumbled to the final release, barely able to see. The override handle was fused, glowing white-hot. I grabbed it anyway. My gloves caught fire instantly. I screamed but didn't let go. Metal groaned, then snapped, the lever tore free. The temperature spiked, then plummeted. 1000 degrees C, 800, 600, 400, containment vented. I collapsed to my knees as a blast of plasma roared past me, sucked into the vacuum beyond the outer hull. The noise was like thunder and tearing metal. The light faded slowly, like the dying breath of a star. "Containment stable," Kira's voice whispered through the static. "Oh God!" It worked. I couldn't answer. My throat was gone, lungs seared from the heat that breached the seals. My vision dimmed. Through the shattered visor, I saw movement not human. The luminous creatures had gathered around the ship, their tendrils brushing gently against the hull. One pressed against the glass near me. The shape was indescribable, shifting, translucent, beautiful. It wasn't hostile, felt curious. Its light brightened softly, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. For a second, I thought I heard something. Not a voice, not words, but a feeling, peace. I rested my forehead against the glass. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though no one could hear it. "We didn't understand." They found my recording days later, at least that's what I hope. Kira and Jean must have followed the river like I told them. Maybe the creatures showed them the safe path. Maybe they reached the valley and launched the distress beacon. Maybe they even made it home. The logs will show that Commander Elias Ward initiated manual containment override during critical core failure at 0417 local. Reactor integrity restored. Casualty 1. That's the official version. The truth is quieter. The planet lives. The forest glows brighter now, the bioluminescence visible even from orbit. The energy we released didn't destroy it, fed it. Somewhere out there, beneath the glassy rivers and luminous trees, a heartbeat still echoes in the dark. Ours and theirs forever linked. I hope when they tell the story they don't call it a tragedy, because it wasn't. It was understanding. Finally, the alarms were screaming before I even opened my eyes. A violent, rhythmic pulse, red light flooding the cabin, the kind of light that means death is seconds away. My restraints bit into my shoulders as the ship lurched again. The stars outside became streaks of molten white. Something had torn through our aft thrusters. I could feel it, the ship was yawing uncontrollably. Stabilizers offline. We're spinning. Tarek's voice came from the cockpit, strained, half a scream over the klaxon. I tried to respond, but my throat was dry, full of metal dust. I tasted ozone and blood. Manual override, I shouted. Cut the rotation. Bleed the forward jets. Through the cracked viewport, I saw a swirl of color. Not the void, but a sky. A pale turquoise atmosphere, dense and glowing faintly from within, like we were falling into a cloud lit by lightning. We weren't in space anymore. Altitude, Tarek, 7,000 meters and dropping fast. The ship jolted so hard that my vision flickered white. Metal screamed as something gave way. The hull buckled, a compartment ruptured, and suddenly the cabin filled with a blizzard of frozen air and papers and sparks. Seal it! Seal it! I clawed at the console, slammed my palm into the emergency partition control. Bulkheads closed behind us, cutting off half the ship, and one of our crew with it. Lien! Someone screamed. It was Mara, our biologist, her voice breaking as the door sealed with a final thunk. No time. The descent alarms switched tone. Impact countdown, 15 seconds. I yanked the harness tighter, gripped the armrest until my knuckles went white. Brace for. The world inverted. A roar, then silence. When I woke, everything was tinted blue. The cabin lights were gone, replaced by a faint radiance filtering through the cracked canopy. The crash had thrown me halfway across the control room. My suit's HUD flickered, pressure stable, oxygen low, one cracked visor seal. The ship was still mostly intact, but tilted at an angle, half buried in something soft. Through the glass, I saw movement. Faint ripples of light, like the ground itself was breathing. Then I realized it wasn't ground. It was growth. A carpet of translucent vines pulsing with blue light, wrapped around the wreck like fingers holding us in place. I crawled toward the cockpit. Tarek was slumped over his console, still breathing, blood beating at the edge of his lip. Mara was on the floor, dazed, trying to unbuckle herself. "Commander," she whispered, we made atmosphere, but the sensors, they're blind. I can't read anything." I looked out again. The forest beyond was alive with impossible color. Trees, or things that resembled them, rose like towers, their trunks smooth and glassy, glowing from within with veins of shifting light. Their branches formed vast webs, dripping with luminous mist that floated instead of falling. A soft rain of green sparks drifted down from the canopy. Each one hissed faintly when it touched the hull. "Where's Lien?" Tarek asked, voice hoarse. No one answered. We all knew. Half the ship and her were gone, buried somewhere behind us in the jungle of light. The first step outside felt like walking into a dream. Our boots sank into a surface that shimmered and flexed, like a living membrane. The air was thick but breathable. My suit's filters registered unknown organic compounds, but no immediate toxins. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the forest. A low, resonant vibration that seemed to pulse in time with the glowing rivers that wound between the trees. Mara knelt beside one of the streams, her scanner out. The liquid looked like acid, a blinding, neon yellow current, but it didn't bubble or smoke. "It's not burning through the soil," she murmured. "High in fluorosilicates and organic enzymes. Maybe it's the planet's bloodstream." "Keep your gloves on," I said. She smiled faintly, but her eyes were hollow. We'd lost too much fuel in descent. The transmitter array was gone. There'd be no signal home, not until we could salvage something from the wreck. We were stranded, and yet, standing there, surrounded by all that light and motion, a part of me couldn't help but feel awe. The planet glowed like a heartbeat. Every few seconds, the illumination of the trees dimmed, then flared again brighter, in waves that rolled through the forest like breath. Erebus 9 was alive. Hours later, as we began setting up a temporary perimeter around the crash site, Tarek called out from beneath the starboard wing. "Commander, you need to see this." I followed him under the scorched metal and froze. The vines that had wrapped the hull weren't just gripping it. They were fusing with it. Thin filaments had crept inside the metal wounds, filling cracks, solidifying like resin. And where they touched, the hull glowed faintly, pulsing with the same rhythm as the forest. "They're repairing it," Mara whispered, "or feeding on it." I crouched closer. The vine was warm to the touch through my glove. When I tapped it lightly, it contracted, not fast, but deliberately, like a muscle responding to pain. "Biomineral synthesis," she muttered, awe in her voice. "They're converting metal ions, incorporating them into their structure. Then we cut them off before they eat through the ship." I reached for my plasma cutter. The moment the blue blade ignited, the vines flinched away. The whole network around the wreck rippled outward, the light dimming across the forest like a shutter. And then it came, a sound. Low, harmonic, but not mechanical. Almost like whale song, echoing through the trees. It wasn't directed at us, exactly. It was as if the forest itself was reacting. Tarek looked around nervously. "You just pissed off the planet. Stay sharp," I said. "Cut the rest of it free." By nightfall, though night here was just a deepening of the ambient glow, we had managed to secure a small perimeter. The vines had retreated into the ground. Mara cataloged the atmosphere. 78% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, trace unknowns. Viable with filters. The temperature was stable, 27 degrees Celsius. Comfortable. Too comfortable. "This world shouldn't exist," she said quietly as we sat by the remains of a portable light tower. "Binary sun system, thin orbit, yet it's balanced. Self-regulating." Tarek was silent, staring into the glowing river beyond. "You think something built it?" "I think something evolved it," she replied. "Maybe both." We took turns watching the perimeter that night. My shift began just after what passed for midnight. The forest hummed softly, like an enormous machine under the ground. I checked the readings, faint seismic activity, repeating every 90 seconds. Not tectonic, rhythmic. And then, something moved at the treeline. At first, I thought it was just the shimmer of light through the leaves. But then the pattern changed. The glow bent, dimmed, and reformed as something large shifted between the trunks. I raised my rifle scope. Heat signature. Diffuse, almost fluid. The outline pulsed in and out of visibility. It was roughly bipedal. No, that was my mind-forcing shape where there wasn't one. It moved like water, flowing between trees, trailing light. "Mara," I whispered into the calm. "You seeing this?" Her voice came back sleepy, static-laced. "Seeing what?" "Movement." "Northeast sector." 10 meters beyond the ridge. A pause. Then, "Commander, there's nothing on my feed." I looked again. The shape was gone. Only the forest light remained, pulsing softly, mockingly. The next morning, I woke to find half of our solar array missing. Not broken, gone. Where the panels had been, the vines had regrown, forming smooth crystalline shapes in their place, humming faintly with captured charge. They absorbed the energy, Mara said, scanning the surface. They're mimicking the panels. Tarek cursed under his breath. Great, the planet's learning from us now. I looked toward the horizon, a field of glowing canopies stretching endlessly under a sky split by two suns. Somewhere out there, Lien's half of the ship was buried. And maybe, just maybe, she was still alive. We go find the other section, I said. We'll need supplies and answers. We left the crash site at dawn or whatever passed for it, carrying what little gear we had. The path wound between the river and the luminous trees, whose trunks emitted low vibrations when we brushed past them. It was like walking through a cathedral of light. Every step stirred faint motes that floated upward and dissolved into the air. The ground beneath us was springy, breathing faintly. After an hour of hiking, the hum changed pitch. Louder, closer. We emerged into a clearing and stopped cold. The ground had caved inward into a vast crater, filled with a web of glowing filaments that pulsed and shifted like a living lung. And in the center of it all, half buried and wrapped in light, was the other half of our ship. Mara gasped. Lien! We rushed down the slope, sliding through the strange soft soil until we reached the wreck. The hull was half dissolved, cocooned in tendrils that looked almost translucent. The air shimmered with faint heat. I climbed up the side and peered through a gap in the fuselage. Inside, the vines had filled every surface, growing through the seats, the consoles, the ceiling. And suspended in the middle of it all was Lien's cryo chamber, glowing faintly blue. The tendrils pulsed in rhythm with the chamber's lights. She was inside, alive. Her vitals are faint, Mara said, scanning through the glass. They're feeding her oxygen somehow, keeping her stable. Tarek stared, horrified. They've grown around her, like a cocoon. Then we cut her out, I said. But the moment my hand touched the metal, the vines tightened. The entire structure groaned. The hum deepened, and a wave of light raced outward through the crater. A warning. The ground trembled. The trees around the pit began to move. Not in the wind, but deliberately, their trunks flexing like muscles. From the shadows beneath their roots, shapes began to emerge. Not human, not machines. Amorphous, translucent creatures. Their bodies made of the same glowing material as the vines. No eyes, no faces, just motion and light. They rose silently, surrounding the crater. And in the pulsing radiance, I realized with a slow chill, this planet wasn't just alive. It knew we were here. The first night on the planet didn't feel like night at all. The bioluminescent forest never went dark. It shimmered in blues and greens, and the air itself seemed to glow faintly, like a mist caught between two suns. Every tree pulsed with internal veins of light, rising hundreds of meters, their trunks translucent and alive. I couldn't tell if they were plants or something pretending to be. We had set up camp beside the wreck, 3 portable domes, power-fed from the ship's emergency reactor. Outside, the ground looked soft, almost mossy, but the moss recoiled when you stepped on it, like it didn't like being touched. Vera was on comms duty trying to raise orbit. Tanner and I took turns watching the perimeter. The third survivor, June, was still out cold in the med pod, a cracked rib, possible internal bleeding. We didn't know if he'd wake up. The soundscape of the forest was unnerving. No wind, no rustling, just a low rhythmic pulse that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Like the whole planet had a heartbeat. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the crash again. The descent through the plasma storm, the way the lightning tore the sky open in green veins, the moment our thrusters died. We should have vaporized on impact, but somehow the ground cushioned us, like we'd fallen onto water only solid. At 0300 local time, Tanner called me out to the ridge. "Commander," he said, pointing toward the horizon. "You seeing this?" Beyond the luminous forest, maybe 2 kilometers away, a faint column of light spiraled upward. It wasn't fire, too cold, too steady, almost like a signal. "Could be atmospheric discharge," I said, though I didn't believe it, or the storm reacting to the terrain. Tanner squinted. "Or someone saying hello." He grinned, but his voice had a tremor. He was scared. We both were. At dawn, or what passed for it, we decided to move. Vera stayed behind to tend to June and monitor the reactor output. Tanner and I packed what we could. Scanners, thermal optics, chemical filters, a single drone with half a battery. The moment we stepped past the wreck's perimeter, our suits began pinging environmental inconsistencies. The readings made no sense. The oxygen ratio fluctuated wildly between 17% and 22%. CO2 levels were unstable, and yet the air smelled clean, almost sweet. I took a risk, lifted my visor for a second. The air was breathable, thick but breathable. Tanner saw me do it. "You're insane. Just testing the data." "Yeah? Then test it for both of us," he said, refusing to open his own seal. We walked for hours. The terrain sloped downward into a basin where the acid rivers cut through luminous soil. Up close, they weren't acid at all, at least not chemically. The streams were full of microscopic organisms that emitted phosphorescence when disturbed. Every step near the river sent ripples of color, gold, blue, violet, racing downstream. It was beautiful, terrifying, but beautiful. "This place is alive," Tanner whispered. "The whole damn thing." He was right. The tree's roots connected beneath the rivers like neural pathways. When I brushed one root with my glove, the lights pulsed outward, as if signaling to the others. I pulled my hand back fast. That's when we heard it. A movement behind us. Something heavy but graceful. A rhythm like footsteps, but slower. Intentional. We froze. The drone whirred overhead, scanning the brush. Nothing on radar. But then, from behind a veil of hanging vines, something moved. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but then it stepped into view. It was tall, maybe 3 meters. Its skin translucent like the trees, glowing faintly from within. Its limbs were elongated, jointed wrong, and its eyes, or what I assumed were eyes, shimmered like molten silver. It didn't attack. It just stood there, swaying slightly, as if tasting the air. Tanner whispered, "What the hell is that?" I held my hand up. "Don't move." The creature tilted its head, mimicking me. Perfect mirror. Then it took one slow step forward. My scanner flickered, registering hundreds of small energy spikes around us. Not one creature. Many. Watching. Hidden. "Tanner," I said quietly, "back up." We retreated slowly, step by step. The lead creature didn't follow. It just lowered itself, almost kneeling, its long fingers pressing into the soil. The ground around its hands began to glow, patterns spreading in spirals. "Commander," Tanner breathed. "I think it's..." The soil under him gave way. He dropped waist-deep into what looked like solid ground a second ago. "Tanner!" I lunged forward, grabbing his arm. The luminous moss wrapped around his legs, tightening like muscle fiber. He screamed. I fired my sidearm into the mass. Blue light splattered like liquid glass, not blood. The creature jerked back, and the roots released him. I pulled Tanner out, both of us stumbling backward toward the ridge. The creatures didn't chase. They just stood there, motionless, glowing faintly. Then, one by one, they faded back into the forest. We made it back to the camp by nightfall. Vera was waiting, pale, eyes wide. What happened to him? Tanner's suit was torn. His skin burned in patches where the moss had touched him. I told her the truth, or part of it. We encountered local life. Non-aggressive unless provoked. Non-aggressive? She snapped. He's half melted. The MedPod's diagnostics showed cellular damage consistent with radiation and chemical burns, but localized, targeted. Like the planet's biology reacted to him. Maybe the air, maybe a defense mechanism, I said. We'll analyze the samples. Vera looked at me, voice low. You don't believe that. I didn't. What I believed was worse. I believed the creatures were part of the ecosystem, not separate from it. The glowing rivers, the trees, the moss, and them. All one system, all connected. That night, I recorded my first log entry. Planet designation unknown. Surface conditions unstable but survivable. Indigenous life confirmed. Displays coordinated behavior, potential intelligence. Unknown motive. Avoid provocation. As I was speaking, June woke up. He coughed weakly inside the pod, eyes glassy. Where are we? Safe, I said automatically. You rest. We'll... Commander! He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. There's something outside. I heard it. I froze. You've been unconscious. No, he whispered. I heard it calling. My blood ran cold. I wanted to tell him it was just the wind, but there wasn't any wind. Later, while Vera monitored Tanner's vitals, I went out alone. I told myself I was checking the reactor perimeter, but the truth was, I wanted to see if they were still out there. The forest was silent. The crash site glowed faintly under the bioluminescent canopy. My boots sank into the living ground, every step leaving a slow, pulsing footprint. Then I saw it. On the ship's hull, carved into the metal like it had been melted by heat, were marks. Circular patterns, the same spirals the creature had traced into the soil. They weren't random. They looked like a map, or a message. Behind me, something moved again. Slow, deliberate. I turned, weapon raised. But it wasn't one of the creatures this time. It was Vera. She was barefoot, her expression blank, eyes reflecting the glow of the trees. Vera! I lowered my weapon. What the hell are you doing out here? She didn't answer. She walked past me, toward the forest. Her hand reached out to touch the nearest trunk, and when her skin made contact, the tree flared to life, light racing up its height like electricity. Then another tree, then another. Within seconds, the entire forest ignited, every living thing glowing in cascading waves. The air itself vibrated. Vera! I shouted, grabbing her arm. Stop! She turned toward me, tears in her eyes, voice trembling. They're not attacking, Commander, she whispered. They're showing us something. I followed her gaze, the pattern of light forming across the landscape. It wasn't random. It was structure, geometry, a network. And in the distance, at the center of it all, the same spiral of light we'd seen the night before rose again. Taller now, brighter. I didn't know what it meant, but every instinct in my body screamed the same truth. Whatever this world was, it wasn't waiting for us. It was reacting to us. By morning, the spiral was no longer just a light on the horizon. It had grown, a towering column of radiance rising from the center of the valley, like a vortex made solid. The trees around it bent inward, their glowing trunks weaving toward the core as if drawn by gravity or worship. The sensors picked it up before we did. Radiation spike, EM interference, a pulse repeating every 73 seconds, not random, not natural. A signal. Vera stood at the edge of camp, staring at it in silence. Tanner lay in the med pod, unconscious again, the veins under his skin faintly luminescent. June was awake but weak, his eyes sunken. I didn't tell him what we'd seen in the night, that Vera had somehow triggered the forest. I didn't tell her either that the patterns she'd touched had spread across half a kilometer before fading. She said she didn't remember it. We were unraveling and the planet knew it. By noon, the ship's power reserves dropped to 42%. Life support was still nominal, but the reactor shielding was degrading fast. If it failed, we'd all cook inside our suits. We had two options: stay and die when the reactor failed or go to the spiral. Vera made the decision for us. They're calling, she said. Her voice was calm, eerily calm. The signal, it's increasing in harmonic intervals. It's structured. It's language. Language, I asked. You think those things out there are talking to us? She turned to me, not talking, responding.
Uncharted.
Commander, we can't move Tanner. He's worse. He was right. Tanner's body had started rejecting itself. Skin blistered where the bioluminescent spores had touched him, eyes flickering with unfocused panic when he came to. He mumbled nonsense between gasps, something about dreams of light and roots inside the sky. I gave Vera a long look. If we go armed. She nodded. Fine. But if they wanted us dead, we'd already be gone. We left Tanner behind with June watching him. I told myself it was temporary. Deep down, I knew I was leaving a man to die. The terrain changed as we approached the valley. The glowing moss gave way to harder ground, crystalline structures jutting from the earth like glass bones. Every time we stepped, they sang faint, harmonic notes that echoed up into the air. A living resonance chamber. Our suits began picking up high-frequency interference, almost like whispers at the edge of hearing. Not voices, data, patterns, binary-like sequences hidden inside the EM noise. We reached the base of the spiral by nightfall. It was enormous, hundreds of meters across, a vertical storm of light made from strands of what looked like liquid glass. It wasn't solid, but it wasn't energy either. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and when I stepped closer, the pulse matched mine. Vera walked straight up to it, no hesitation. It's not dangerous, she said softly. It's alive. She reached out her hand. I tried to stop her, but she touched it first. The entire structure shifted. A ripple of light spread outward, and suddenly the ground beneath us dissolved into a translucent field of living fibers. A lattice. The spiral responded to her contact. She wasn't burned. She wasn't harmed. But her suit lights flickered, her vitals spiked, and her voice changed. It's showing me something, she gasped. Commander, it's not a machine. It's the planet's brain. What are you talking about? She pointed upward, where the spiral narrowed into the clouds. This is a relay, an organic network. The whole ecosystem is connected through it. Every root, every tree, every organism. It's one consciousness. I felt my stomach twist. You're saying the planet is alive? No, I'm saying it remembers. The air shimmered. The spiral began projecting images, not holograms, but distortions of space and light. We saw shadows of structures, impossible towers rising into the sky, beings of translucent skin and radiant eyes, the same kind we saw in the forest. But these weren't primitive. They were builders, scientists, engineers of the planet itself. And then catastrophe, a great storm, tearing through the skies, a flash of energy consuming everything. The light beings collapsing into the soil, merging with the trees, with the rivers, with the roots. It wasn't evolution. It was survival. They had become the planet to live on. A self-preserving world, a consciousness distributed across an entire biosphere. They turned themselves into the ecosystem, Vera whispered. They didn't die. They transformed. The realization hit me like a physical blow. And now we've contaminated it. She looked at me, eyes wide, full of guilt. That's why they reacted to Tanner. His body, the metal in his blood, the polymers in his suit, they're foreign. They're trying to protect themselves. The spiral began to pulse faster, more violently. The ground shook. The resonance became deafening. Something was coming. I grabbed Vera's arm. We need to go. Now. But she resisted. You don't understand. It's communicating. We can learn from it. The ground erupted. A surge of light burst upward, throwing us both backward. My visor cracked, the world spinning. Through the haze, I saw movement, dozens of figures emerging from the spiral's base. The same translucent creatures we'd seen before, but now their bodies were streaked with energy, their movements synchronized, deliberate. One of them stopped in front of me. It didn't attack. Instead, it extended a limb, not in aggression but offering. I stared at it, breathing hard. What do you want? The creature tilted its head, then pressed its palm to the ground. The soil beneath us shifted again, forming a projection of our ship, and then the reactor core glowing red. It showed an explosion, a wave of destruction spreading outward. The message was clear. "They know," I whispered. "They know our reactor's failing." Vera was on her knees, dazed. "They're warning us." "No," I said slowly, realizing the truth. "They're afraid. Because if the reactor went critical, the blast would poison the soil, the rivers, the living network, kill the planet's consciousness. To it, we weren't explorers. We were a virus. We ran. Back through the luminous forest, past the singing crystals and pulsing roots. The creatures didn't follow, they didn't have to. The forest itself was shifting, moving, reacting to our presence. Trees bending, pathways closing. The air thickened like gel. By the time we reached camp, it was chaos. The medpod alarms blared. June was gone. The pod lay open, empty. Tanner's vitals were flatline. I called out, "June, report." No answer. Then I saw the trail, footprints glowing faintly, leading away from the wreck, toward the same direction we'd just come from. Vera whispered. He heard them too. We were losing everyone, one by one. I checked the reactor. The readings were worse than I'd feared. Core temperature rising past safety limits. Containment failure imminent. Less than 12 hours before meltdown. "We have to shut it down manually," I said. "If it blows, it'll destroy everything within 50 kilometers. Vera stared into the trees. "Maybe that's what they want us to do. Stop it. Prove we're not a threat." I clenched my fists. "Or maybe they're herding us into a trap." She turned to me, eyes glowing faintly in the dark light. "Does it matter? Either way, if we stay, we die. If we go, maybe we earn their mercy." For a long time, I didn't answer. The bioluminescent trees swayed in the still air, pulsing gently, like they were breathing in unison. Finally, I nodded. "Then we finish what we started." She looked at me with something between fear and hope. "Commander, gather what you need. We're going back to the spiral." That night, as we prepared the suits and shut down non-essential systems, I recorded my second log. We made contact, not with a species, with a world. A planet that thinks, remembers, and protects itself. Reactor core unstable. If we fail to contain it, we'll destroy something ancient. If we succeed, maybe it'll let us live. I looked up at the valley, where the spiral still glowed against the horizon. For a moment, I thought I saw shapes moving within it, humanoid, waving, waiting. And for the first time since the crash, I wasn't sure if we were explorers anymore. Maybe we were the invaders. The first tremor hit at dawn. It wasn't seismic, it was rhythmic. A pulse from below the surface, synchronized with the reactor's rising temperature. The forest responded to it like muscle tissue reacting to pain. Trees contracted. Rivers shifted color from soft cyan to violent red. Even the air grew thick, heavy, humming with static. The planet was warning us. Vera and I worked in silence, stripping the wreck for parts, rigging the portable power cells into a cooling array. The reactor chamber, buried under the ship's middeck, sounded like a heart about to burst. Every time I looked at the gauges, the numbers were higher. Core temp, 1,370 degrees Celsius. Containment integrity, 42%. At this rate, we had 8 hours before it blew. Inside the medpod bay, Tanner's body had started glowing faintly beneath the skin, veins tracing the same spirals we'd seen in the forest. He looked peaceful now, too peaceful. Vera paused beside him, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then she closed the pod and sealed it. "You think he's gone?" I asked. She didn't look up. "I think he's part of them now." I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because part of me wondered if she was right. We left the camp with the portable reactor controls and a half-charged drone. The plan was simple. Reach the spiral, interface the control array directly with the planet's energy field, and use it to stabilize the core. If the planet was truly one network, we might be able to vent the radiation into its biosphere without killing it. It was insane. It was also the only plan we had. The path back through the forest was different now. The landscape had changed overnight. The trees had shifted positions, leaning away from us, their glow dimmed to a defensive violet. The ground quivered beneath our boots, alive with motion. The planet wasn't just watching us anymore. It was reacting to our intention. Halfway to the valley, we found June, or what was left of him. He was kneeling in a clearing, eyes open, face serene. His skin was translucent, glowing like glass from within. The same spiral marks covered his arms, chest, neck. When Vera called his name, he turned toward us, slowly, mechanically. "Commander," he said. His voice was calm, layered, wrong. "It doesn't want to kill us." I aimed my weapon. "What did it do to you?" He tilted his head. "It showed me." Vera stepped forward despite my warning. "June, what did you see?" "The memory," he whispered, "of when they became this. They wanted peace, survival, but now they're afraid of us. The reactor, it's pain to them, burning nerves." He reached out his hand. "Let us help." His fingers glowed brighter. I saw veins under his skin pulsing with light, each beat synchronized with the earth beneath us. He wasn't human anymore, not entirely. Vera didn't pull away when he touched her hand. The moment their skin met, her pupils flared white. She gasped and fell to her knees. I fired. The shot tore through June's chest. He didn't bleed. He just shattered, his body fragmenting into luminescent dust that drifted upward and vanished into the air like smoke. Vera screamed, clutching her head. "Why did you do that?" "Because he wasn't June anymore," I snapped. She looked up at me, eyes glowing faintly. "Maybe that's what we need to be." We reached the valley by mid-afternoon. The spiral towered over us, brighter than ever, a column of impossible light tearing through the atmosphere. The air burned cold. Each breath felt electric. I set down the reactor controls and began linking the array. Vera was quiet for once, watching the spiral. Her expression was unreadable. "Once we link," I said, "we'll have to trigger the vent manually. Radiation levels will spike. You'll need to stay back." She shook her head. "You won't survive it alone." "I'm not asking you to join me." I wasn't asking permission. We both knew there was no time to argue. I wired the control panel into the reactor's relay line. The indicators turned green barely. The spiral pulsed, responding to the frequency of our system. The ground trembled again, but this time it wasn't hostile. It was receptive. "Come on," I muttered. "Just a little more." The readings aligned. Power flow stabilized. For the first time since the crash, there was hope. Then the spiral's pulse accelerated twice per second, then 3 times, then a blur of light. The field around it erupted, energy surging through the ground and into the reactor feed. Alarms screamed. "Radiation spike. Disconnect it," I shouted. Vera hesitated. "It's communicating, wait." Vera now. Too late. The surge hit us like a tidal wave. My HUD flashed white, systems overloading, suit temperature skyrocketing. I fell to my knees, blinded. The air was molten light. Through the haze, I saw her. Standing within the spiral, arms outstretched, body wreathed in energy. The light wasn't burning her. It was absorbing her. She turned toward me, smiling through tears. "It's letting us in," she said softly. "It understands." "Vera." I tried to move, but the force pinned me down. "You'll die." "No," she whispered. "We'll live, both of us." The light consumed her completely. One moment she was there. The next, only her voice echoed through my comms. Distorted, layered, part of the pulse itself. "Commander, it's using me to stabilize the link. You can vent the core now." My heart hammered. "Vera, you can't. Do it, please, before it's too late." I triggered the sequence. The reactor responded instantly, core vent opening, containment fields redirecting the plasma feed into the planet's network. The ground roared. The rivers turned gold. The light from the spiral shot into the clouds, splitting the sky open in veins of blue fire. For a moment, I thought we'd succeeded. Then came the backlash. The planet screamed. Not sound, vibration. A wave of pure energy that shook every bone in my body. The spiral convulsed, collapsing inward, dragging everything around it, soil, rock, trees, into its core. I barely made it back behind the ridge before the ground gave way. I looked back just in time to see the valley sink, a glowing crater swallowing itself in silence. The light dimmed, the pulse faded, and the forest went dark for the first time since we'd arrived. When I woke, it was night again. The air was still, the planet silent. The spiral was gone. In its place stood a crater of glass and stone, faintly steaming. My suit alarms were dead. I couldn't tell if the reactor was stable or if I was dying from radiation poisoning. Vera, I whispered into the calm. Static. I tried again. Vera, respond. Then a flicker. A voice, faint, almost a whisper. I'm here. I turned. The crater glowed faintly at the center, a shape rising from the molten surface. Human, barely. It was her. Her suit was gone, skin translucent, eyes pure white light. She moved slowly, gracefully, as if weightless. Vera, hybrid. God, what have you done? She smiled weakly. I finished it. The link held. The reactor's stable. The planet's healing. I staggered closer. We can go home. We can. She shook her head. There's no home for me now. Her body flickered, light rippling through her like water. I can feel it, Commander. The planet, it's inside me. I'm inside it. It's not angry anymore. I reached out, hand trembling. I can still help you. She touched my helmet with glowing fingers. The glass melted under her touch, the air flooding my face. I should have suffocated. Instead, I felt warmth, oxygen, life. It won't let you die, she said. It wants to remember us the way we remember it. Tears blurred my vision. Vera, please come back. She smiled again, peaceful, radiant. I already have. Then she stepped backward into the crater, into the light, and dissolved. A cascade of luminous dust rising into the night sky. The glow spread outward, across the trees, across the rivers, until the entire planet breathed again. Slowly, rhythmically. Alive. I don't know how long I sat there. The reactor was silent, the ship's hull still smoking in the distance, the forest glowing softly like it was dreaming. When the wind finally came, the first true wind since we crashed, it carried a faint whisper through the trees. Not words, not language, just memory. I whispered back, "We're sorry." And for a heartbeat, the forest pulsed in reply.